It is said that at Christmas time, it's one of those times when the veil between the world grows thin. Spirits and other such like beasties walk among us. So, in that spirit, I bring you these spirits. Marley was dead, to begin with. There was no doubt whatever about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner Scrooge signed it. And Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his pen to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend, and his sole mourner. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name, however. There it yet stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people new to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. He answered to both names. It was all alike to him. Oh, but it was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone was Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. External heat and cold had little influence on him. No warmth could warm, no cold could chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. Falling snow was more intent upon its purpose, and pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have it. The heaviest rain and snow, hail and sleet could boast of the advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down handsomely, and he never did. Nobody ever stopped him on the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked of him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place as Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and upon seeing him coming, they would tug their owners down doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an evil eye, dark master." Ah, but what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, upon Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was a cold, bleak, biting, foggy winter, and the city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. The door of Scrooge's counting house was open that he might keep an eye on his clerk, who in his dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one single coal. Ah, but he could not replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room, and so surely as the clerk came with the shovel, the master predicted that it would be necessary for them to part immediately. Wherefore, the clerk put on his wise comforter and tried to warm himself by his candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first intimation that Scrooge had of his approach. "Ah," said Scrooge, "humbug! Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do. Out upon a Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item in them through a round dozen of months presented dead against you? If I had my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart, he should." "Uncle!" "Nephew, Keep Christmas in your own way and let me keep it in mine. Keep it? But you don't keep it. Let me leave it alone then. Much good may it do you. Much good has it ever done you. There are many things from which I might have derived good by which I have not profited. I dare say Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I've always thought of Christmas time when it's come around, apart from the veneration due to its sacred origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem, by one consent, to open up their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they were really fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I say that it has done me good, and it will do me good, and I say, God bless it. The clerk over in the tank involuntarily applauded. Let me hear another word from you, said Scrooge, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir. I wonder you don't go into Parliament. Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with me tomorrow. Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression and said that he would see him in that extremity first. But why, cried his nephew, why? Why did you get married? Because I fell in love. Because you fell in love. Growled Scrooge, as if that were the only thing in the world more ridiculous than Merry Christmas. Good afternoon. Nay, Uncle, you never came to see us before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now? Good afternoon. I want nothing of you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends? Good afternoon. I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. But we've never had any quarrel to which I've been a party. But I've made the homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So, a Merry Christmas, Uncle. Good afternoon. And a Happy New Year. Good afternoon. His nephew left the room without an angry word notwithstanding. The clerk, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let two other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and now stood with their hats off in Scrooge's office, their books and papers in their hands, and they bowed to him. Scrooge and Marley's, I believe, said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley? Mr. Marley's been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night. Ah, at this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, said the gentleman, taking up his pen, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want of common necessaries. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir. Are there no prisons? Plenty of prisons, said the gentleman, laying down his pen again. And the union workhouses? Are they still in operation? They are still. I wish I could say they were not. I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course. I'm very glad to hear it. Under the impression that they scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude, a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink and means of warmth. We chose this time because it is a time of all others where want is keenly felt and abundance rejoices. Now, what shall I put you down for? Nothing. Oh, you wish to be anonymous? I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and workhouses, they cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there. But many can't go there, and many would rather die. If they'd rather die, then they'd better do it, and decrease the surplus population. At length, the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge, dismounting from his stool, tacitly admitted the fact to the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat. "He'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose." "It's quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd make yourself mightily ill-used of it, now." Yes, sir." "Yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work." "It's only once a year, sir." "Poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning." The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, he went down a slide at the end of the lane of boys 20 times in honor of it being Christmas, and then ran home as hard as he could pelt to play at blindman's buff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms on a lowering pile of building up a yard. The building was old enough now and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being let out as offices. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door of this house, except that it was very large, and also that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence at that place. Also, that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London. And yet Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without undergoing any intermittent process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face, with a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but it looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned upon his ghostly forehead. As Scrooge looked steadily at it, at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. It was boom, boom, and he closed the door with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchants below appeared to have separate peal of echoes all its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too, trimming his candle as he went. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for it being very dark, but darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. Before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of that face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. Small fire in the grate, spoon and basin ready, and a little saucepan of gruel. Scrooge had a cold in his head. On the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude up against the wall. Lumber room as usual, old fire guard, old shoes, 2 fish baskets, washing stand on 3 legs, and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers and his nightcap, and sat down before the very low fire to take his gruel. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened upon a bell. A disused bell that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose, now forgotten, with a chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with a strange, inexplicable dread that, as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. Soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. The this was succeeded by a clanking noise, deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Then he heard the noise much louder. On the floors below, coming up the stairs, and coming straight towards his door. It came on through the heavy door, and a spectre passed into the room before his eyes. And upon its coming in, the dying flame leaped up as though it said, "I know him! Marley's ghost!" The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat tights and boots, the tassels on the ladder bristling like his pigtail, and his coat skirts and the hair upon his head. The chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him and looking through his waistcoat, could see the two buttons behind. Though he looked the phantom through and through and saw it standing before him, though he felt its chilling influence of death-cold eyes and noticed the very texture of the folded kerchief bound round his head and chin, he was still incredulous and fought against his senses. "How now," said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much," Marley's voice, no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you then?" "In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" "I can." "Do it then." Scrooge asked that question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that, in the event of it being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace as if he were quite used to it. "You don't believe in me?" "I don't." "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know." "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheat. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an underdone potato. There's more gravy than a grave about you, my friend, whatever you are." Scrooge was not so much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart as a means of distracting his own attention and keeping down his terror, for the spectre's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bones. But how much greater was his terror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round his head as if it were too warm to wear indoors, his lower jaw dropped down upon his breast. "Mercy! Dreadful apparition! Why do you trouble me? And why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come to me?" "It is required of every man that the spirit within him would walk abroad among his fellow men and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turned to happiness." Again the spirit raised the cry and shook its chain and wrung its shadowy hands. "You are fettered. Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. Is its pattern strange to you? Or would you know the weight and length of the strong coil you bear yourself? It was full and heavy and long as this 7 Christmas Eves ago, and you have labored on it since. Oh, it is a ponderous chain." "Jacob," Scrooge said imploringly, "Jacob Marley, tell me more. Please speak comfort to me, Jacob." I have none to give. It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge, as it's conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men. Nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all that is permitted to me. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me, in my life my spirit never roamed beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me. Oh, captive bound and double ironed. Oh, that's him. Oh, captive bound another iron. Not to know that ages of incessant labor by immortal creatures for this earth must pass into eternity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in its little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for its vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life's opportunities misused. Oh, yet such was I. Such was I. But you were always a good man of business, Jacob, faltered Scrooge, who began to apply this to himself. Business! Cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business. Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate and began to quake exceedingly. Hear me, cried the ghost. My time is nearly gone. I will, said Scrooge, but don't be hard upon me, don't be flowery, Jacob, pray. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of my procuring Ebenezer. You were always a good friend to me, thank you. You will be haunted by 3 spirits. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? I think I'd rather not. Without their visits, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1. Couldn't I take a ball at once and have it over with, Jacob? Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, and the third the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table and bound it round his head as before. The apparition walked backwards from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself up a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. And when they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up his hand, warning him to come no nearer. And Scrooge stopped. Not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the raising of the hand he became sensible of confused noises in the air. Incoherent sounds, lamentation and regret, wailings inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in their mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window, desperate in his curiosity. He looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering hither and thither in restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few were linked together, and some were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost in a white waistcoat, with a monstrous iron safe attached to his ankle, who cried piteously at being unable to help a poor wretched woman with an infant who had saw below upon a doorstep. The misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters and had lost that power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or the mist enshrouded him, he could not tell. But they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it had been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say, but he stopped at the first syllable, and, being from the emotion he had undergone, the fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed without undressing, and fell asleep upon the instant. Such is Stave 1 of A Christmas Carol.